Since we are talking about subdividing, I thought I'd explain the basic principle behind it. So let's say we have a quad, meaning a polygon with which is described by 4 vertices, which is preferable when it comes to subdividing anything. When you are subdividing it, what you actually do is you take each edge, each of 4 edges, and you divide it in 2. And then when you connect the lines, you get yourself 4 polygons. In other words, here is our sphere. When you are dividing this sphere, like so, I've pressed the button which says divide, you not double, but you quadruple the number of polygons in this sphere, right? There are 4 times as many polygons in this sphere as it was before you subdivided it. And now you can put a little bit more detail into this model. But still, not very many polygons here. Let's divide it a couple more times. Now there are even more polygons. And here where the power of ZBrush really becomes evident. You can freely jump between these subdivision levels as if you had a few different models. This is a concept which those who are new to ZBrush find a little hard to wrap their head around. At the lowest subdivision level, you have these polygons clearly visible, while at the highest subdivision level they are not as visible, but the overall shape of the model is still there. So as I said, it almost looks as if you have several different models, but it is one model. And the fact that you can freely jump between these subdivision levels is actually a very valuable tool for you, because many brushes behave different depending on the density of the mesh. For instance, if I take a clay brush and I start roughing in some form on the global scale, it would work much better if I would be on the lowest level of subdivision. And the same brush acts somewhat differently if you have a denser mesh. So what you do, you use the lowest subdivision level to basically rough in the shape in general, and the highest subdivision level is only used for refining your model. You are not going to take, say, a sphere, divide it 10 times and then start to sculpt. This is not how ZBrush works. Now I think it is a good time to start talking about brushes and different properties brushes have. At the top of the screen there is a very important property, which is Z intensity, which pretty self-explanatory. It is the power of the brush. The bigger the number, and the maximum is 100, the stronger is the effect on the mesh. If I would lower Z intensity, the brush, clay tubes, barely affects the mesh at all. Next to Z intensity is there are 2 other sliders, focal shift and draw size. Draw size is basically the size of the brush, while the focal shift is the size of this circle inside the biggest circle. And these 2 circles, what they basically do, they describe the fall off of the brush. It is a little bit less evident with the clay tubes brush, so let's take something different, like standard brush. If you change focal shift to -100, you can see that the effect is kind of strange. The edge of the brush is very pronounced, while if you take it to previously it was -100, but if you take it to just 100, you get yourself even stranger results. So you should probably use something in between. And the standard brush is just one of many brushes that are available inside ZBrush. If you open the brush palette, which is at the top left corner of the interface, you can see all the different brushes which are available for you. But even brushes you can see here are not all the brushes that you have inside ZBrush. If you press comma on the keyboard, you'll display the lightbox, which is the library of shaders, tools, and also brushes. If you choose a brush category, you'll see different folders like Form, Groom, Insert, and inside each folder there are several brushes. So there are really a lot of brushes inside ZBrush. But these are not all the properties. There are also Z-add and Z-sub, very important properties. Also pretty much self-explanatory. Z-add helps you to push out the form, while Z-sub pushes the form in. If you need to quickly switch or temporarily switch between the two modes, all you do is you press Alt. For instance, I have Z-add selected, I push out the geometry, but if I were to press Alt, I would start pushing it in. I release Alt and I push it out again. Very comfortable. There are also such buttons as mRGB, RGB, and M. They have to do with painting your model. But we are not going to talk about painting today. It is a subject of a different tutorial. There are also different moods for any particular brush. Right now we are working with the default strokes, but we can also select something like drag rect. What's that? Well, it is something like a projection. It's a little bit easier to explain if you select an alpha. Alpha is a 2D image which can aid you in sculpting. Let's select something simple like this strange circular shape. With drag rect, here what it does. It creates projections, geometric projections on top of your model. These are just a few of the most important functions inside ZBrush. ZBrush, as I said, is a very powerful application. By the way, all those buttons and tools which control the property of the brush, you can access them pretty easily if you just press spacebar. You press spacebar and you have all those menus basically condensed, along with a color palette. Here you have a tool menu, you have a brush menu, alpha menu, drag rect, one of those brush moods, and also you can choose a material as well as adjust draw size, focal shift, Z intensity, etc., etc. The last thing I'm going to demonstrate to you today is matcap menu. The surprising thing about the matcap menu is that there are many different complicated shaders inside ZBrush which pretty much work in real time. For instance, this is Sculpty, and you also have skin shader, which is pretty interesting. There are different materials which can imitate subsurface scattering or complicated reflections, like the chrome blue tint. You see? It's clearly something is reflecting there, but it all works in real time. If you want to make it look even more pretty, you can press this BPR button at the top right corner of the screen. Let's say I press it, there is a bar at the top, and you see the image changed a little bit. What happened? I press it again. Well, first of all, the quality of the rendering increased. There are no edges, no aliasing on this model. The shadows are a little bit more pronounced, which is good. And if you really get used to all these tools, you can create a very cool looking illustrations, because even to this day ZBrush is still an illustrator's tool, even though it is widely used to create very complicated high-res models, which is used in movies, in games, etc. It is still also a tool for an illustrator. I'll leave you with this thought. It's probably enough for a brief introduction of ZBrush. in later lessons we'll cover different, more specific functions of this wonderful program in more detail. See you then. Cheers!